You're listening to the Piano Parent Podcast with Shelley Davis, episode 378. Hey there, and welcome to the Piano Parent Podcast. I'm Shelley Davis, a longtime piano teacher and parent with my husband of 4 mostly musical kids. As parents, we spend so much time trying to encourage and motivate our kids. We wonder if we're doing the best things for them. We second guess our decisions, and we worry if we're going to scar them for life. While you focus on encouraging your kids, I'm here to reassure and inspire you. I'll be here every week with practice tips, inspirational teacher interviews, and musical topics to help you impress your kids with your musical knowledge. Parenting is not for the faint of heart, but it's much easier with support, and you have come to the right place. All official, and I think we're going good. And getting started is always the hardest thing for me to figure out what to say. But Michael Clark, I am delighted to have you. Actually, should I say Dr. Clark? Dr. Michael Clark?
If you want to.
Okay. I'll start off formally and then we'll get more casual as we go.
Sure.
Dear listeners, I am excited to introduce to you today a fellow Texas teacher, and we'll learn more about where he teaches and more of his background. But let me introduce to you Dr. Michael Clark. Michael, would you please just introduce yourself a little bit?
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. Yes, I currently live in Waco, Texas, and I teach at Baylor University.
Awesome. You are the assistant piano professor, is that the...
Yes, and I teach piano pedagogy and applied lessons and oversee our class piano program.
Fantastic. And so right now, as we're recording, you're in between semesters. When will your
Yes,
semester kick off?
right after Martin Luther King Day, January
Oh,
20th. So I
oh,
have 2 weeks to get my ducks in a row and do a lot of practicing. So it's going to be a full 2 weeks even before the semester starts.
yes, I'm jealous of that. Before I pressed record, I was confessing to Michael that this morning has been frantic, busy, crazy. We just had some flooring guys leave. My sons were up for the holidays, which I love my children, four children, 2 boys, 2 girls, but they were in my house for a long period of time. And I'm kind of glad to have my house back. So,
Yeah.
but I'm teaching this week. We're recording on
Oh, okay.
January 5th, and I've got lessons this afternoon. So, you know, Michael, that this is a podcast designed for parents of piano students. And I always love hearing from other people's experiences, and I learn from that. So, before we get into the main reason that we're talking today, would you just give us a little background on how you got into piano, how your parents were supportive, or maybe
hmm
mistakes that they made, or however you would like to frame all of that? Give us a little bit of your backstory.
Absolutely. So I grew up in a small town in southwest Missouri called Bolivar, near Springfield, Missouri, in the
Okay.
Ozarks. And my parents were very supportive of music, and they had each taken lessons when they were younger. They weren't very advanced pianists, but they knew it was something that they wanted their kids to at least start. So I had an older sister who took piano and continued through high school. So when I was about 7, she would have been in middle school. So she was already playing, and I was ready to start myself. And there was a new teacher my sister, I should say, had just switched to. And I started with that teacher as well. And she was wonderfully supportive. She taught at the small university in my hometown called Southwest Baptist University. So I took with her actually from age 7 all the way through high school. So it
Wow.
was kind of a unique experience for me in that way. And starting out, I had a knack for it, but I wasn't particularly advanced, but I kept going. I remember it was probably about middle school that I started to take it more seriously. And I was playing Chopin's Raindrop Prelude. And that really stood out as like, wow, this is a real piece. And I remember there was a part in the music. It kind of feels funny now, but I was thinking like, can I go faster here or can I go slower? Like, wow, I'm an artist, I can do
Yes.
something with this music. And so that really kind of took it to a different level in 7th-ish grade. And at the same time, I wanted longer lessons. And my parents said, well, if you're going to have a longer lesson, you need to practice the length of the lesson. So I think I'd been having half-hour lessons. So I was supposed to be practicing half an hour. And then we went up to 45 and eventually an hour. My parents were never extremely hard on me about it, but that was one time where I remember them enforcing a policy around that, and it worked. It made sense to me why it was more of a commitment, so I needed to up my preparation.
Sure.
And then in high school is actually probably my freshman year. I was already looking ahead toward college. I knew I wanted to leave my small town, and I was thinking about what would I want to study, and it just became clear that music was something I didn't want to get rid of. And I realized actually I wanted it to be the main thing. So I started to practice quite a bit more. I started going to some summer piano camps, which were really inspiring because I was from a small town. There were a couple other kids that played piano, but no one very seriously. So then I saw the level that I was like, wow, it wasn't, it was more inspiring, I would say, than intimidating. But I realized I need to practice more. So I started practicing maybe like 3 hours a day my
Okay.
sophomore year of high school, and then even 4 hours a day junior and senior year to get ready for college auditions.
You just said two different things that I would like to kind of dig around with a little bit. First of all, I like the idea that your parents said that you need to kind of practice the same length as your lesson. That makes perfect sense. I don't know why a lot of people have difficulty figuring out what time their kids should practice or how
Hmm.
many days they should practice, and that's just an easy formula. So for piano parents listening, if you've had a question or a little bit of pushback from your student, that's just an easy currency. Your lesson
Yeah.
is whatever time, and so your practice should be an equal amount of time. And then the other thing has completely lost my mind. Let me what was the other thing? And then the other thing is the fact that you had these opportunities to sort of get outside of your bubble, outside of your
Yes. Mhm.
space, and what an eye opener that was. I'm glad you saw it as an inspiration rather than intimidation.
Mhm.
But it's so good, I think, for students, for parents to give their children opportunities that might be just a little bit of a stretching out of outside of their comfort zone and out of their norm.
Absolutely. Because since lived in much bigger cities, I was in Houston for about 8 years. And as a teacher, I was seeing, oh, there's so many events for students, but there really weren't that many for me where I was growing up. So I think when students have an opportunity to try different types of either competitions or festivals or different recitals or summer camps, it can kind of show them the particular areas they like the most.
Yes, yes, and you never know until you try, and you maybe
Mhm.
try and, "Okay, that one didn't really connect, so we'll try something else at the next opportunity." I wonder, is your sister still musical? Did she pursue music as well?
So not professionally, but she took lessons through high school, and actually she's a mother now, and she has a 6-year-old son who has a real knack for music. And I was just visiting them over Christmas, and we had a little lesson.
Oh,
It's hard for him to learn from me, hard for him to sit still, but
right.
but he does pick things up, and it was cute to see how I would tell him something, and at the exact time he wasn't really wanting to do it. But then later, I would hear him go back to the piano and try it out. So
Yay.
I think he'll definitely pick it up in his own time, and I'm sure they'll get a teacher for him in Seattle where they live.
Sure.
So she certainly has supported music continuously, and provides an instrument in the home for her kids.
I think that's really cool. So kudos to your parents for
Yeah.
making these opportunities for their kids. And you just never know. I mean, there are so many things available for children growing up these days, whether it's music or athletics or dance, gymnastics, all the things. And I applaud parents that make those opportunities available for their children, but then also can kind of rein it in and not let
Mhm.
them get overwhelmed with too many activities.
Sure.
It's a fine balance. What was there some sort of event or impetus that kicked you over into deciding to teach, or were
Hmm.
you headed down a performance track, or kind of how did you
Yeah.
enter that?
Well, I think it was something I saw modeled from my teacher. So growing up, she taught at this small university. So that was really the only example I'd seen of someone who does piano professionally. It's their whole job. And it was partly teaching. And then also she performed. And so I think I thought that's a great model. Wouldn't I love to do something like that? So I think that's how it kind of started. And then in undergraduate, I majored in piano performance. I went to Ithaca College in upstate New York, which was it was nice. It was fun for me to get out of the Midwest, just try something new. Had a great experience there. But then when I was looking for a master's program, I was interested in one that was in performance and pedagogy. So that's how
Mm.
I ended up at the University of Houston. And then have been in Texas ever since.
And we're so
I,
glad
I
you are.
yeah, that's right. So because it's such a vibrant place, of course, for music and music teaching, and I think I just realized teaching is something that I value, and I want it to be part of my life, and I needed some more training specifically in teaching. So that's how I ended up in that degree program and moved to Texas in 2014.
Awesome. And from all of my interactions with our state conferences and things like that, you're a very vibrant member, a vibrant teacher, and very warm and welcoming. And so I'm glad you're here.
Oh, thank you.
The reason that I invited you to join me on the podcast is because you have, over the last several years, kind of done some extensive research into someone who was little known a few years ago. And so I'm not sure the best way to segue into that, except to say, and I was going to look up a previous episode where I covered a little bit of the history of Mendelssohn,
Mhm.
bringing Bach back.
Yes,
And how
yes.
that Johann Sebastian Bach's music had sort of faded into the dust of history, until about 100 years later, Felix Mendelssohn brought it back.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
I compare you the similar kind of thing because you, are making known the music of a wonderful lady from the last 100 years, Miss Florence Price. So I would love for you to tell me how you got into it, what you're doing, and introduce us to her as well.
Absolutely, yes, and I think that's a really good parallel because I think it is kind of a revival of interest, and it's certainly not only me. There's many other pianists and scholars who are working on her music, but I'm very happy to be a part of it. So I first heard her name actually in 2018. Piano Magazine did an article about her, and I thought, I've never heard of this person. She's a Black woman from Arkansas, lived in the late 19th century, born in 1887, died in 1953. And since I was from Missouri, it's nearby to Arkansas, and I just thought, I can't believe I've never heard of this person. And as I reflected back on my education, I had a wonderful education in so many ways, but I didn't learn about very many women composers at all. And I
Right.
certainly hadn't performed any. And so I just started to kind of reassess and think like, why was that? And so I just read about her in that article. And then in 2019 at the MTNA National Conference in Spokane, a woman named Linda Holzer gave a presentation on Florence Price and she performed some of the pieces. And that was a big difference because hearing the music, all of a sudden I was like, wow, this is such beautiful music. And I had been doing a lot of American composers like Aaron Copland, and a man named Richard Danielpour and Frederick Jeffsky. I love all their music, but it was really refreshing to hear classical American music that was more kind of tonal and palatable to a broader audience.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the music that a performer likes is not always the music that a broad audience likes.
Yeah.
And so I just heard the music and I thought, I love this. And I just know people are going to love to hear this music. So I got excited about the idea of discovering a whole repertoire that I just had never even heard about. So at that time, I was doing my doctorate and I kind of had the rest of my recitals planned. So I didn't really, I was kind of just finishing that.
Sure.
But then the end of my doctorate dovetailed with the beginning of COVID. So that's when we were all at home, and I was able to acquire some of the pieces that had just recently been published. And I started to learn her music at that time. And I just had a lot of fun with it. I thought this is so great. And at that time, I was just learning a couple of pieces. But then an opportunity came for me to give a talk for the Katy Music Teachers Association. And they just said on a topic of your choice. And I thought, this would be a great opportunity for me to dig in a little bit more into Florence Price. So I said, "Oh, I'm going to talk about Florence Price," not really knowing much.
Right.
Um, but I had like 6 months to start to get ready. So then I thought, I'm just going to find everything I can find. So there was a new biography that had just been published, called "The Heart of a Woman." It's the only biography of Price at this
Oh, wow.
time. And I started to like learn more about her life story. So I'll just kind of recap the
Oh,
highlights of
yeah,
that.
please.
Um, yeah, so she was born in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1887. So what I didn't really understand, I had to learn a lot about kind of the history, is that after the Civil War, there had been a period of flourishing of Black communities in the South, especially in Little Rock. So her family was actually moderately wealthy. Her dad was a dentist. Her mother was also a pianist and a business owner. So she had a relatively privileged upbringing. But during her lifetime is kind of when the Jim Crow laws were going
Mhm.
into effect. So actually, things got worse for her during her
Mhm.
life.
Yeah.
So she grew up, went away to New England Conservatory in Boston to study piano and organ. And she started taking composition lessons at that time as well. Then she came back and taught at some historically Black colleges, one in Atlanta, Clark University. Then she got married, settled down in Little Rock, had two children, and she began teaching piano. And as far as we know, that's kind of how she got going with composition. Again, was composing for her students,
Right.
pedagogical pieces. And then in 1928, things were just getting worse and worse for her and her family in Little Rock with violence against Black people. And so she and her family moved to Chicago as part of the Great Migration northward. And that was really a great turning point for her because she found a really supportive community through a group called the National Association of Negro Musicians, which really promoted her work. And then she started getting interested in bigger types of composition. So she composed her first symphony and entered that into a competition where it won first prize. And because of the attention that was given to the piece because of the first prize, the conductor of the Chicago Symphony, Frederick Stock, decided to give the work its orchestral premiere by the Chicago Symphony in 1933 at the World's Fair. So that was a huge milestone. She was the first Black woman to have an orchestral work performed in history. So that was her biggest kind of milestone at that point. But she lived another 20 years and kept composing more symphonies, many more piano pieces, concertos, and she had some success, but it was hard to punch through, as you can imagine. And so she just composed hundreds of pieces, but only a fraction of them were even performed. And then after she died, for most, certainly there was like a very small minority of people who knew who she was and kept remembering her. But
Right.
to the larger community, she was forgotten. And it was probably the late 90s that some musicologists, the author who wrote the biography, her name's Ray Linda Brown. At that time, she was doing her research and started to uh, edit some of the manuscripts that were available, but still just not a lot of energy around her music. But the biggest turning point came in 2009 when hundreds of pieces were rediscovered in an abandoned house that she had formerly lived in. They were just in the attic, manuscripts and manuscripts. And so, yeah, I know it's crazy. It's so
Yeah.
crazy. But yeah, so a couple was just moving into the house. The pieces, uh, it's hard to kind of put the pieces together in this story. Like, how could it happen? But basically, it was a second home, like a vacation home that the family had. Then she died, and just like boxes and boxes of things got put in different places. And these were just boxes that were in the attic. And it was children and grandchildren and just not understanding what things were in boxes.
Sure.
It's hard to, especially, I'm sure it must have been demoralizing too, to feel like, well, I know my grandmother did music, but people don't really remember her whenever it's just boxes. And if they're not musicians, they wouldn't know. But
Right.
anyway, thank goodness, they got rediscovered. So that was 2009, and it took a while for then all the music to end up at the University of Arkansas Special Collections, where it is now. And then um, the scholars started to kind of look at it. Some of the pieces started to be published. And that was, through the 2010s. And so that's kind of when mentioned, 2018 is when I first heard of her. So the energy was kind of boiling up. And I think during COVID, um, related to George Floyd and a lot of just energy around, let's just try to better understand the contributions of Black composers. That's, I would say, it really exploded. And there's that kind of the Bach revival. You could say this is the Price revival,
Yeah.
among other composers too.
Awesome. Blah, I can't even digest her.
I know that was a
It's
long
like,
one.
no, it's so good, and I love that you're so well versed and you've done your research, so I can just soak up what you've learned. Thank you for sharing it with us. So many questions. Well, I just said my husband and I cleaned out our bedroom because of this new flooring that we had installed, and we've only lived in that for 26 years, but it had accumulated some stuff and just throwing it in boxes, and we'll go through the boxes later. So I can completely understand
Mhm.
how they could have just set aside. We'll go through that someday, but it's not
Yeah.
important right now. And then
Hmm.
how it so could have easily just
Yeah.
been landfilled. Oh my goodness.
Yes. I know.
My husband and I got to visit Scott Joplin at an apartment or a home that he
Ooh.
had lived in St. Louis
Hmm.
a few years ago, and they had tried to mock it up as well as they could for the time, but
Yeah.
they said they didn't have any original things of his. It had just all
Hmm.
gotten lost to time, and so
Yeah.
I'm very grateful that whoever bought this home
Yeah.
recognized that they maybe didn't know what they had, but they knew they had something,
Right.
and, that's so cool. So you, last year published a collection of her pieces.
Yes.
Will you
Hmm.
talk about that a little bit, how that came about?
Absolutely. So when I started to get a hold of the pieces that were available, I was really enjoying them, but I also realized, sometimes I thought, is that a wrong note? Or just I had some questions. And so I was interested in the process of editing and how these pieces made it out. So um this was, kind of 2022-ish. I had just started my job at Baylor, and I applied for a grant to make a recording of some of her music. She composed a lot of waltzes, and so I just noticed that. I thought, oh, well, what if I just put together a recording of all the waltzes that I knew about at that time, and then some other character pieces that fit in with that. So I did that recording project in the summer of 2023, and it came out in 24, and that you can stream that wherever music is streamed, Spotify, YouTube. It's called Waltzes and Character Pieces of Florence Price. But as part of the grant that I got, I asked for some travel funds to visit her special collections at the University of Arkansas because I wanted to see the manuscripts because I had some questions about, is that the right note? Blah, those little
Yeah.
details. And that's when I realized there's just still so many pieces that have not been published. So certainly there's been a stream of pieces coming out. So, progress is being made, but I just realized there's still so many more.
Yes.
And especially uh, a lot of pieces for developing artists. So, intermediate or she even has total beginner pieces. So I thought, especially because I do teach children and I teach piano pedagogy at Baylor, I thought, oh, this would be really valuable. Could I be part of helping get these
Right.
pieces out? And so at that time, I had reached out to a few publishers just to kind of put feelers out, and I didn't have any luck at first. But the timing was serendipitous because uh, music that was not published in her lifetime uh, entered the public domain in January 1st, 2024. And so it was just kind of around the time that I was going there because that was one of the holdups for different publishers was like, well, what's the copyright situation? But it entered the public domain, pieces that were not published in her lifetime on January 1st, 24. So at, and that was about the time my album came out in February 24. And so I had reached out to Hal Leonard, but it hadn't really gone anywhere. But then when my album came out, an editor that I was talking to, it kind of jogged her memory. And she got back out to me and she said, hey, you know, let's talk about this project again. And so she had me write up several different pitches for what pieces to include. And then she had to kind of work it up the chain at Hal Leonard. and check out all the copyright. And so, even at that point, it took us another like 6 months. So then it was really the summer of 24 that I began editing these pieces from the manuscripts. So I took another trip to Arkansas and I had scans of them. And so I, learned really well how to put them in Sibelius. That was a big learning curve. But then the real experts at Hal Leonard, of course. And so they helped make it look really good. I was really pleased with that. And so then it finally came out January 25. And so that collection's called Florence Price, Rediscover Gems for Piano Solo. And it has about 20 pieces, 25. Some of them have multiple movements. Kind of hard to figure out how to count
Right.
it. But at a kind of an intermediate level. So the first pieces in the book would be accessible for late, I'd say just probably right at intermediate level students toward early advanced at the end. So it kind of fills in a gap of what
Right.
had been available.
Right.
And it's just been a wonderful year to experience people getting the book and playing the pieces. And I've seen some videos of students that I have no connection to playing the pieces. And that's so special just to imagine that, her pieces are out in the world and students are enjoying learning.
So gratifying, and that you had the opportunity and the desire to shine a light on her music. Like you said, I mean, with so many manuscripts that she wrote, that would be too much for one person. And so I'm
Mhm,
very grateful. It seems like a lot of people. I'm hearing more about her, and I'm
mhm,
grateful that different people are doing the investigation and doing the editing and making sure that her music gets the attention that it
mhm.
deserves. And
Yeah.
do you have plans? Are you working on anything else? I mean, I'll link
Mm,
up what you already have
yeah. Mhm.
made available, but do you have more coming down too?
Yes. So I'm always looking for more opportunities to bring her music out. And so there are s- what I've learned basically is with publishing, the music publishing industry has changed a lot, like all of our industries. And so they have to see the financial viability to want to put it out. And so I
Sure.
think the book has been doing decently well. So um, I will just say we're in early talks about trying to get a second one out. So I'm certainly pushing as hard as I can. And the best way that people could ensure that that happens is to buy the stuff that's already there.
Very
And I
good.
don't just mean my publication, but if you like a composer, buy their music. And that's going to show the publishers that their music is viable.
Of course. And we know that, but to be reminded of it is very valuable. And
Yeah.
could I ask you, these may not be intelligent questions, but I have seen the cover. Was there anything about the pictures, like a vase of flowers, if I remember
Yes.
correctly?
Beautiful.
Beautiful
Um,
artwork.
yes. So they picked that out, but they picked so well because it was by a black artist, an American black artist. I'm gonna forget his name. I think its last name is Porter. But I can verify
Yeah, we'll
that.
put it in the show
Uh,
notes. Sure.
Perfect. Yes. And so they picked it out. They're so beautiful. And
Yes.
I couldn't have been happier with that choice. And that kind of connects to her music as well, because her music has a few different styles. Some of it is kind of romantic, pulling from the 19th century tradition. She has some kind of impressionistic pieces, and then music more directly connected to African American styles like spirituals. So it's kind of a blend of all of that, and so I thought that kind of impressionistic artwork was a nice choice.
That is so cool. I love hearing about that, and that they were took such care to pick art
Mhm.
that would complement the music, because you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but we do.
Yes.
And that artwork is very, it draws you in for sure.
Mhm. Mm.
Could I ask you too, how did you go about selecting which pieces to put together?
Yes, yes. So it's tough because I was trying to pitch 2 books.
Oh
And so
boy.
then yeah, I wanted I was just trying to get as much of the music out as possible. So then it was like I was trying to pitch kind of an early intermediate and a late intermediate book, and then they said, "Well, we're just gonna do 1 book, pick
Okay.
take the best of each." But of course, I didn't want I thought they were all very good. So I just tried to get a range of levels basically. And I'm proud of how that turned out. I think because they are it certainly does advance as the book goes by. So um it's a book that if you bought it for a child who could only play the beginning pieces, well, as they advance, they'll be able to play
Sure.
more of the pieces.
Yes.
So I like that about how it turned out. But certainly there are more pieces of Price that are even easier. And some of them have been published, but this was one of the reasons I was so grateful to do it with Hal Leonard, because they're such a big publisher. This book is available on Amazon or wherever music is sold. Some of the other publications are just harder to get a hold of. It doesn't mean they're not good. It's more barriers for people who don't necessarily know that they like her music. They're going to have to go to this one website and pay shipping, and it's a
Right.
little expensive for just a little tiny book.
Right.
So it just puts up barriers. So I'm just grateful that it worked out that this book is available pretty much wherever music is sold at an affordable price, so that more people will get to just experience it.
Yes, I agree with that. And I like what you said that having a wider range of skill level
Hmm.
repertoire in the same volume, a beginner or not a beginner student, but a student that is first beginning in the book can
Yes.
grow with it. The book will have
Yes.
more to offer. And I would say even the opposite is true. I think it's fine if you're working
Absolutely.
on more advanced stuff to have something that's a little less
Totally.
mentally. So we got can go both directions with that.
Definitely,
That's
and
really
great
cool.
sight reading material, or just for fun piece. I think
Yes.
people will find. Yeah, I mean the music is in that collection particularly is mostly very warm and kind of positive and glowing, mostly in major keys in this book, and I think it's the kind of music people just enjoy hearing.
That's so cool. That is so cool. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
think. I just wish, I'm glad to be born when I was born and all
Mhm.
of that, but it would be so neat to just hop back in time and learn more about her and how she was, day to day. And
Yeah.
I think that's neat.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Well,
I'm
yeah,
getting,
she was just such a remarkable woman, and I mean, and she went through a lot too. Her husband was abusive to her, and they got divorced. And this was
mm,
right when she moved to Chicago. So then she was a single mother, and then and she remarried. But it's not clear. They stopped. Her second husband. They stopped living together after a few years. So we don't really know what happened. So I mean, she just had to face so much, and to think that she reached such high artistic levels, and then to think that it almost wasn't recognized, and it's
yes,
belatedly, so it's a
yes.
really remarkable story.
And I don't want to interject into the story with my lack of knowledge, but I know that I sort of have a tendency to maybe fantasize these composers that they just
Yeah.
lived this, glamorous life, so relaxing. All they could do is just write music. Maybe writing music was an outlet for her with
Mhm.
some of the other things that she was dealing with. We talk about playing music can be an emotional, creative outlet for our
Mm.
students, but maybe that was the same for her as a
Yeah.
composer.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely, and I think she felt that she was giving voice to her heritage as well, and it was a way for her to express herself and her identity, I think.
That's really neat. So I wonder what other hidden treasures are there in somebody's attic?
Totally. I know. Yeah. So I'm excited because I did record some of these pieces actually this past summer, and they're going to come out in an album on March 20th. So I believe by the time this podcast comes out, you can stream that one. It's going to be called Florence Price Piano Sonata and Other Works. So she does have a big 3 movement piano sonata that I recorded. Plus the rest of the pieces are short pieces from the book.
Very cool. That I keep saying very cool. I'm glad to hear that.
Hmm.
I'm really glad to hear that. I've really enjoyed this conversation so much. Um, just the idea, I probably won't put this anywhere, but my husband is a descendant of a man named Thomas Jefferson Rusk, who signed the Texas Declaration of Independence.
Oh,
So my
cool.
husband loves to tell me that he is Texas royalty. I am not. But, I understand that there are some of Rusk's papers, maybe at UT Austin, and I would love to see if I could find a way. So just the fact that you did that is very
Yeah.
interesting to me.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah,
that's
I think
important.
basically you just have to kind of create an account through their website and
Okay.
then make an appointment. I mean, that's what I did at Arkansas. It's like these all these archives are open to people if you just kind of go through their procedure. And, you know, the hours are always very limited, you know, but then
Sure.
if you just make an appointment, then you can go.
Well, that would be a kind of a cool field trip for
Totally.
a family. If you're looking, there's so many ways that you can encourage a love of music for your children. It's not
Hmm.
always sitting at the piano bench. And they can be
Hmm.
inspired with a trip. They can be inspired with a summer camp and
Absolutely.
lots of different opportunities. Michael, I really appreciate you spending some time with us. Thank you for the work and the effort that you did to learn more about Florence Price and to bring her music to light and sharing it with the rest of us. Is there anything else that you would like to say before we sign off?
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I think I would just say I encourage people to keep exploring the music of Florence Price and also many other composers that we are learning more about or their music is getting better known. You mentioned Mendelssohn earlier. Mendelssohn's sister, Fanny Mendelssohn Hensel, was an amazing composer whose music is so beautiful. She wrote incredible pieces for the piano that I personally want to put some more time in learning. Clara Schumann, a French composer named Mel Bonis, who lived at the time of Debussy. You know, these are just a few. Uh,
Yes.
I think that I would just encourage all of us to kind of open up our eyes and think, wow, wait, who are some of the other composers that we don't know as much about and listen more to their music or try to play it?
Yes, that is such a good word. We're so familiar with there was a book, what is it? David Barber wrote a book, Bach, Beethoven and the Boys. And so we're familiar with those top hits, but there
Yeah,
is a wealth of music of all different styles, all different nationalities.
yeah,
It's just a complete treasure trove of music
totally.
available. And then, like
Hmm.
you mentioned, I really get charged with the history of it all. I did
Hmm.
do a podcast, on Clara Schumann and,
Yeah.
the things that she and Robert went through,
Mm,
similar to Florence, and so
yeah.
these were real people that lived real lives, and,
Yes.
their music is sort of a time machine that helps us to
Mm,
kind of connect with them, and so
totally.
I think that is a good Oh, tell us, please, you have one recording that has
Yes.
been out for over a year, and, then you've got a new recording. You said that's Florence Price
It's
Sonatina?
called Piano Sonata and Other Works. You
Piano
know, it's kind of
Sonata
just
and
one of
Other
those
Works.
generic titles.
And at the moment, that's streaming. Those are your performances.
Yes,
And then we've also got the book that we can check into
absolutely.
and all that.
Yes, and I think by the time that this podcast comes out, another publication project may have come been announced. So I'm
Awesome.
hopeful. Fingers crossed for
Awesome.
that.
So do you have a way that we can connect with that and follow? If it's not yet, maybe we can follow to see when it will
Yes.
be available?
S um, Probably my Instagram, which is at Michael Clark Piano. Uh, I will definitely announce it there, and then I do have a website, michaelclarkpiano.com, and that will, if and when there's news, I'll put something there too.
Awesome.
And yeah, and the albums are available to stream Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, wherever music is streamed. I think it can also be, you know, downloaded if you want for purchase. But of course, I mostly just stream music these days too. So
Right.
I would just encourage people to take a listen.
Sure. And like you said earlier on, the more we listen, the more the algorithm and the people that
Hmm.
make these decisions know that it's something that we're interested in.
Absolutely. Hmm.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you so much. Great talking to you, Shelley.
And that's the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for hanging around all the way to the end. If you haven't done so already, this would be a great time for you to hit the subscribe button. If you're listening through Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever your favorite podcast player is, hit subscribe so you will be the first to receive next week's episode. I would love to connect with you. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Piano Parent Podcast, and you could just email me, Shelley at pianoparentpodcast.com.